How do you do? My name is Alfred Hitchcock, and I would like to tell you about our good friends, the birds.
That's the damnedest thing I ever saw.
Birds just don't go around attacking people without no reason.
Yes, they attacked the children, attacked them.
What's the matter with all the birds?
Birds are not aggressive creatures, miss. They bring beauty into the world.
Those gulls attacked.
Impossible.
They came in right down the chimney.
All the windows are broken in Dan's bedroom. All the windows.
Why are they doing things?
It's the end of the world.
Are the birds gonna eat us, Mommy?
Get yourselves guns and wipe them off the face of the earth.
That would hardly be possible.
Mitch, don't!
The 5 continents of the world contain more than 100 billion birds.
All at once, the birds were everywhere. Why don't you all go home? Lock your doors and windows.
Did you get the windows in the attic? When do you think they'll come?
What happens when you run out of wood?
I don't know.
You don't know. When will you know? When we're all dead.
After my father made Psycho, which is such a big success, he was, as usual, having his major trouble, which was looking for a story. Everybody expected so much, you know, and it was very hard to find stories, and he finally did find The Birds, which was from a short story by Daphne du Maurier, who wrote Rebecca, which was his first film in this country. And at the time, he wasn't sure if it would make a full-length movie.
We had just finished working on North by Northwest, and I saw Hitchcock on one of the sound stages. He stopped me and he said, I have a friend, Daphne du Maurier, who has written a short sort of novella. He said, would you read it and see if physically it creates too many problems? And I read it that night, and I was bowled over by its strength. But I saw it a little differently. I saw it as a mood piece, and I didn't see it as a narrative story. I spent the rest of the night and worked all night on it. And the image that came to me was Munch's Scream. I saw that as the kind of icon for the whole thing.
My father had initially purchased the rights to The Birds for his television series. After he read of real bird attacks taking place across the country, he felt the story had cinematic potential, and he brought in Evan Hunter to adapt the short story.
It was a sort of an apocalyptic short story, and it's about these birds inexplicably attacking this isolated little farmhouse in Cornwall. And I read it, and I would have given my right arm to work with Alfred Hitchcock. I then spoke to him on the phone, and he said, come on out with some ideas. He said, we're throwing away everything but the title and the notion of birds attacking human beings. He said, so come on out with some ideas. I remember Hitch showing me a lot of newspaper articles about unexplained bird attacks as a reminder that these things do happen, so we weren't dealing entirely with fantasy.
So then he said, well, what do you think? Can we physically attack this project? And I said, well, the only thing is getting the birds into it. In those days, we were using blue screen for traveling matte backgrounds. And in those days, the blue screen very often had a rather disturbing fringing. And I knew that if we were to shoot these small birds with fast-moving wings, that it would be just a messy blur.
The blue screen process, while it had been essentially perfected in 1958, was still not quite to the level that Hitchcock wanted. And the best examples of traveling matte work in general that Hitchcock had seen was the sodium traveling matte shot process that was used primarily at the Disney studio. The sodium process was a method of combining foregrounds and backgrounds that were photographed at different times in an optical printer in post-production. At some point, you have to create a matte or a silhouette that enables you to distinguish photographically between the foreground, which is usually an actor against a screen, and the background. In the sodium process, the background was illuminated by yellow sodium light. Of course, the actors in the foreground were illuminated by white light. There were 2 films in a special camera, an old Technicolor camera. One film was sensitive only to the sodium light on the backing. The second film in the camera was sensitive only to the white light falling on the actors. So as a result, there was absolutely no contamination of the foreground actors by the lighting from the background. Typical of blue screen shots of the period was a sort of blue fire in hair and on the edges of objects. And the sodium light, because there was no light from the backing on the actors at any time, the sodium system could produce a higher quality composite that didn't exhibit the sort of blue flare and blue halos that were sometimes seen on blue screen composites of the day. Disney had brought the sodium process to a high level of perfection, and Ub Iwerks, who was the head of the Disney Special Processes Department, was hired as a consultant, and the Disney sodium equipment was used to create the traveling matte shots on the birds.
And it was a wonderful matting situation. It would even mat smoke. It's not used now because it was very cumbersome. Now remember, we're talking several years ago. Today, many of these problems would be solved with a computer.
Oh, I think that The Birds was one of the hardest pictures for him to make because it was so technical, and he had to be so prepared for it that literally, as we know, when he decided a movie, he would draw the whole movie. Well, it took him a long time to draw all of this.
Because of the difficult technical problems, we knew we were going to have continuity sketches. Well, Hitchcock loved to work that way anyway. His main thrust in all of his work was preparation. As a matter of fact, he sometimes facetiously said he was bored with shooting the picture. The excitement came with the ideas that were generated in the preparatory portion of the filmmaking process. He liked to have it all clear in his mind so that before he started to shoot, he saw the whole movie in his mind. There are very few people, directors or otherwise, that can hold this kind of a concept. Harold Michelson was the main production illustrator on The Birds. He did, I think, almost all of the illustrations.
I was given the script, and with Bob Boyle, who was the production designer, we would discuss the scene. And in fact, when they went up to Bodega Bay to shoot the whole company, I stayed at Universal. So in many cases, I was on my own in interpreting the script. And I did stuff for a few weeks, and then I got a call to come up there. And so they set me up there. So evidently, what I was doing was right. Hitchcock's method of shooting, moving in on a subject slowly, or objective, subjective way of shooting, which I hadn't heard before and doing, I, of course, went along with it, and I learned an awful lot about how to make a movie.
His working on The Birds, I mean, this was all done in pre-production, was worked out with Albert Whitlock, the mad artist, and a crew that went to San Francisco and sat in the dumps in San Francisco for months.
I was thrilled about it. I was and totally amazed about it. Of course, there was a master who was directing.
And it is a kind of Judgment Day film. It also basically says that, it's all going to go back to Mother Earth. She will prevail.
It's the end of the world.
Oh, when I first saw the movie, I loved the movie. I still do. It's one of my favorites to watch. It scared me when I saw it, and I'd been on the set, and I knew all the different things. But it was a great movie. I think it's one of his best.